Good morning, everybody. Our local character this week is the one and only Ken Fulk, interior designer, event designer, vaunted member of the Architectural Digest 100. We are sitting with Ken in his most recent local project, the Mary Heaton Vorse House, which we'll get to in a minute. But first, I want to ask you, Ken, about your humble beginnings in Provincetown. How did a boy from Virginia get to make his life in Provincetown?
I moved to Boston right out of college. I followed a boy there, first boy I ever kissed. I was late to the game. And a friend brought me to Provincetown on a summer afternoon. We didn't even stay the night, and I was mesmerized that a place like this existed on the planet. And coming out for me was not an easy thing, and I had this sort of long, difficult journey with it because I thought I was broken. I thought something was wrong with me, and to come to this place and to have a sense of belonging and freedom, I felt it instantly. And tomorrow, Friday, will be the 29th anniversary of the day I met my husband Kurt in a laundromat in Boston. And we had both just come from Provincetown. And so it became immediately part of our lives. We returned here, sort of hanging out with 12 other people in a summer share. Kurt cashed in a stock certificate the next year that his father had given him so we could have our own rental. And then we moved to San Francisco, but we never left Provincetown behind. We would come back for 2 weeks every summer. And then sort of impulsively, maybe 15 years ago, we purchased a house in the Far East End, a wonderful old house that we loved, and we rented it out most summer except for a week or so, and would come in the fall. And then came the Bryant house. That was my beginnings to Provincetown. So it's been nearly a 30-year history.
Most of your life.
Most of my life, at 33, so I came at 3. So.
That's amazing. I mean, you can take the boy out of Provincetown, but you can never take Provincetown out of the boy.
Can't. It is the most impactful, meaningful place in both of our lives. We spend more time here than we spend anywhere else. I travel around a lot. I used to. And, it was always the barn run to get back to Provincetown, like the horse wanting to get back to the barn. It was me running back to Provincetown.
It must be your kid's favorite house, the dog.
It is by far. I mean, they have a pretty good life. I'll say Provincetown's their favorite too. They get to swim twice a day and jump off the dock. If anyone follows me, they're probably tired of seeing the dogs run into the water, but it is one of the greatest joys.
So Ken, I want to talk a little bit about the house that you actually live in,
Sure.
which is known colloquially as the George Bryant house. You purchased that in 2012?
Sure.
That's what the internet told me.
Okay, if the interweb told you that, yes, this is our 8th summer in the house. It was actually George Bryant's mother's house. The Bryants have a long, wonderful, storied history here in town and are certainly part of the fabric. And beloved George, who was the town historian and the holder of so many of its wonderful secrets. And so George had lived in the house next to it, and then at one point moved into with his mother's house. Bought the house and really wanted to maintain it, to have it feel as if if George walked in, that he would still recognize it just without all of the things. And so we actually held, when George passed away, the family came to the house, and we had drinks and some food to sort of honor him. A photo by Misha Richter of George hangs in the house.
I feel like a lot of the really historical places here could very easily turn into something that doesn't look like P-Town anymore.
Yeah, I mean that definitely connects us to where we're sitting, because for me the what's beautiful about P-Town is that it is like nowhere else. I don't want, I find living in a house that looks like it could be nowhere else other than P-Town, that reflects the history, that reflects the people that live there and their marks on the house and the life in the house. That's far more valuable to me than having, polished marble countertops and, perfect surfaces. I want to see the hand of time on it, and I I think that's what's so unique about this place, but that can so quickly get erased. And if I can be a vessel for anything, it's to help people maybe appreciate that and preserve the bits that are left.
So we are right now sitting in your most recent Provincetown project, the Mary Heaton Vorse House. And for those of you who don't know who Mary Heaton Vorse is, get somebody in your family to buy you for Christmas, Time in the Town, a Provincetown Chronicle. I don't have the time here to explain everything to you about how important she is to the town. Ken obviously knows. I got a chance to walk through the first installation here, which Joe Sheftel curated, and everything that you've done here is so beautiful and magnificent. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to pass?
Sure. It is directly across the street from our house, and it was a forlorn house that sort of had come a begging. I think Josephine Del Deo writes about this house in a beautiful poem about this house in the early 80s. And in that poem she talks about whether it will stand another winter. And so I really didn't know. I knew all about Mary Heaton Vorse, and I keep her book by my nightstand. I actually had bought up a few first editions because it meant so much to me, that chronicle of this town, and I knew her story, but I didn't know much about the house, and I'd never been in it. And one day I was introduced to her granddaughters, who still owned this property. They are the daughters of Joe O'Brien, granddaughters of Joe O'Brien, who was Mary Heaton Vorse's second husband, the husband that she purchased Lewis's Wharf, that became the Provincetown Playhouse. And when you read her book, obviously her real love was Joe O'Brien, who died a young man. And if you read one excerpt in that book, you have to read, there is a poem or a sort of elegy to Joe O'Brien from Susan Glaspell. And it will make you understand his impact. So they came to us and said, we understand you love Provincetown, and we were gonna potentially try to save our grandmother's house ourselves and live here, but it's too big of a project. And they own a house. The property went from Commercial Street to Bradford Street, and they own the house in the back, and there's a great little old rustic barn that they're hoping to restore. So they said, we know you love Provincetown. Would you be interested in our grandmother's house? And I somehow just said yes, even though we don't need another house. We certainly didn't have the money to go just randomly buy another house. But I somehow just couldn't bear the thought that it would be, I don't think, and probably maybe even me wouldn't have done it had I known what it really entailed. So we agreed to buy it, and then we spent about a year trying to figure out how to save it. It had such a part of Provincetown lore. It was initially known as the Kippy Cook House, because all of these houses, 5 in a row, were owned by the Cook family, who were the big whaling family of the east end of town. And the big pier across the street, and what is angel food was the chandlery. And Mary Heaton Vorse always called it the Kippy Cook House. And it was built sometime between 1760 and 1780. And Mary Heaton Vorse came here at the turn of the 20th century with a bunch of sort of leftist bohemians from New York. And she was sort of the grand doyen of the group and hosted everyone. She bought this house the second summer she was here. And the book you reference is really a love letter to this town. So we knew a lot about it, but we spent a year trying to figure out how to save the house, because it had been neglected and it was essentially kind of rotten, and how to not have it collapse. And so we did that, and then we began sort of putting it back together with a man named Nate McKean, who for him and me together, this was truly like, P-Town. How to save this house, how to put the pieces back together where they didn't exist, and he did such an extraordinary job. But we thought that this house could be that it could really bring art and bring community back into this, to show people what these interiors might look like, but also to really be an asset for all of the arts organizations. We have Hari Neff here as our first resident, and she's been writing here. She's been channeling Mary Heaton Vorse, which is great. And we've had a beautiful little talk in the garden. And so I feel like if ever the town needed it, this moment in time, to really reflect on who we are as a community and have a space to do that in carefully and safely, I think it was meant to occur now. Like this is it seems somehow destined, and I think Mary Heaton Vorse is happy. Just behind you, we have her hats, we have her books, her New York Times obituary, and her spectacles, and we've certainly been collecting wonderful stories about her. We found a video of her clipping the roses and talking about this house and this town at age 90. And the other part of it is definitely to honor her legacy. She was a big deal, and I think about the people that came before us that really helped make this town what it was, and our obligation to do that, to carry our weight and to give back. I tell everyone, like, our greatest asset outside of this amazing setting is its people. You don't meet anyone that spends time in Provincetown that doesn't love it intently. And that's a powerful thing to harness. We have lots of differences and we can disagree about things, but that is one thing that we all have in common, is how deeply we love this place. And so I think harnessing that and harnessing that community is vital, and hopefully this house can play some tiny little role in that.
So Ken, I want to ask you about the moment A.B. Rosen called you about redoing the cloud room at the Chrysler Building. Like, how did that make you feel? That's insane to me.
It is insane. I mean, and that's sort of the contrast of my life, sort of having these crazy, big, wonderful life. He called me and said, Ken, it's A.B. Rosen, and I didn't even know he knew my name. And he's like, I just bought the Chrysler Building, and you're the only person I could think to call. I was like, what? And so people sometimes ask me, they're like, when you were like a little kid growing up in Podunk, Virginia, did you think you'd be working on the Chrysler Building? And I'm like, yes, that's all. I had this crazy big sort of, my mother would call them illusions of grandeur when I was a kid, and I did think that. And so it is utterly like a crazy dream come true to get to work on the Chrysler Building and to recreate the Cloud Club, which is a historic space in the building that existed. They built it, I think, for like Texaco or somebody to convince them to come into the building. They made this fabulous club, and it is otherworldly to go there and to we're literally dressing the person in a very sort of Wes Anderson way that's going to greet you in the lobby.
Nice.
And lead you up. This is on 2 floors of the building, and it is the space. The Chrysler Building has the iconic eagles that set right where the pinnacle goes up, and there are these, you've probably seen models out on the eagles. Well, this is where the terraces are, so you can walk out there. So the first time I went to visit, you step out there. One, the railings are like this long, and you're plastered against the building because it's just heart-stopping. But all of New York is falling out around you, and it's crazy. And we're swinging for the fences. And I have to tell you, A.B. is this perhaps notoriously difficult guy. He's never been that way with me, but he has an opinion, and every single presentation we've done, he's just said, fantastic. I think that's great. And we literally are swinging for the fences with spectacular, beautiful design, really taking the Deco inspiration and blowing it up, because I think it's certainly the most beautiful building in New York, perhaps one of the most iconic buildings in the world, and I feel a sense of obligation to make sure that space we're creating lives up to it. But I am the most fortunate fellow on the planet. I love what I do. You know, I'm one of those people who would do it for free. I did do it for free before I figured out that people might pay me to do it. And so it is nothing but joy. Yes, it's a lot of hard work, but you know, I got to make up my life, and I never worked for anyone else and was never really trained. But I always just sort of knew that life was supposed to be a certain way. It was like a pair of glasses that I put on, and I'm like, you're gonna have such a better time if we like go do this, or this looks this way. And I mean, it was me setting the table when I was 6 years old and making sure that we had to use the good china at lunch and clip the flowers from the garden and do all those things. And so to be doing the Chrysler Building, it's, you know, it's an utter fantasy to create the Cloud Club. So I can't wait to have everyone there, anyone watching, come join me at the Cloud Club.
When
for
do
cocktails.
we get to come?
It'll be next year at this point. I mean, things had slowed down given the situation, but I would think by this time next year we'll be having martinis in the Cloud Club.
I can't wait.
I
That sounds
can't either.
amazing. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
No, thank you. I'm happy. I'm a new fan of the show. I'm a subscriber. I can't wait. I have to catch up. I missed an episode. So
Thank you so much. Thanks.
thank you guys for doing this.
Of course. Bye, guys.